Welcome to About Life channel. Before you start watching the video, I want to ask you to help develop and subscribe to my channel. You will not be difficult and I am pleased. Freedom of speech is very important to Americans. Polls show that the vast majority of people believe that the government should not restrict the ability of citizens to express their opinions, including in public places, the press, and the internet. These people believe that the right to express one's views is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. As Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes once observed, protecting free speech is not only free thought for those whose views coincide with ours, but it is also free thought for those whose views we hate. At our request, University of California free speech expert Professor Eugene Volokh has selected 3 archival Supreme Court cases that show how free speech is protected in the United States and what speech cannot be protected by the Constitution. In 1964, a leader of the racist Ku Klux Klan was arrested for advocating violence. His speech at a rally was caught on film. He spoke about revenge, a non-existent combination of the words vengeance and revenge, against African Americans and Jews. The Supreme Court ruled that the defendant's ability to make this speech was constitutionally protected. The decision was motivated by the fact that there is a distinction between speech that generally justifies criminal acts and speech that directly incites the commission of a crime. So if someone gives speech in front of a crowd gathered outside a particular building and calls for that building to be burned down, Volokh explains, it can be punishable. Much of the criticism of existing rules, existing laws and existing social institutions include speech that can be perceived as encouraging illegal actions. The expert says, people should be free to express these views. In 1960, the New York Times published an ad in support of the civil rights movement condemning the police actions of the city of Montgomery, Alabama. Some of the statements in the ad were clearly untrue, and the chief of Montgomery's public safety department sued the paper for libel. The Supreme Court ruled, despite the false statements made, the newspaper is constitutionally protected because it published the incorrect information inadvertently. Volokh notes, the decision resulting from this case was an important precedent. Good faith, that is, unintentional errors, in reports about officials must be constitutionally protected, even if false. Otherwise citizens would have no opportunity to criticize government officials. 19-year-old Paul Cohen was arrested for walking into a courthouse in California wearing a jacket with profanity on it in protest of military conscription. A lower court ruled that Cohen had the right to speak out against military conscription, but that he had no right to display profanity in a public place. That ruling was appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court clarified that people are free to choose their words. Volokh says, even if it's angry words, even if it's words that are considered offensive, that in itself can be an important part of the message. Does that mean you can always say whatever you want? The expert points out that each of these cases also demonstrates the specific and precisely defined scope of the application of free speech law. In the case of the Ku Klux Klan, the leader was calling for actions that, if carried out, would be criminal. The Supreme Court decision is clear. If his speech had called on listeners to immediately commit a crime, such as immediately commencing a robbery, riot, or arson, that speech would not have been protected by the First Amendment. In the case of a newspaper that published inaccurate information, its article would not have been protected by the First Amendment if the newspaper had intentionally published such information, and the use of foul language in a public place is punishable, as Volokh assures us, if it is directed against a particular person or provokes violence. If you have watched it up to this point, then you were touched by this story. If so, do not forget to give it a like and write your opinion about this video. It will help me in promoting the channel and more motivation to continue to do so. Thank you very much for watching.